Imagine an empire that for like 6 centuries literally held the keys to the world. It controlled all the vital arteries of trade between East and West. It was an absolute powerhouse of culture, conflict, and innovation, standing right at the crossroads of civilization. Today, we are diving into the incredible story of the rise and fall of that empire, the Ottomans.
So, that's the big question we're going to tackle, right? How in the world did one empire manage to dominate that critical bridge between Europe and Asia for so long? And, just as important, what happened when that dominance finally started to crack?
The foundation of Ottoman power, you can boil it all down to just one word: geography. Their empire wasn't just big, it was built on what might be the single most strategically important piece of real estate on the entire planet.
So to really get the Ottomans, you have to understand this concept of a geopolitical crossroads. They controlled the land and sea routes that connected the incredible wealth of Asia with the hungry markets of Europe. It didn't matter if you were trading silk, spices, or even ideas. You had to go through them. This wasn't just a nice little advantage, it was the ultimate leverage.
But, you don't just stumble into a position like that by accident. The Ottoman rise was a story of pure, calculated ambition and a stunningly rapid expansion that, honestly, caught the whole world completely off guard.
The 1400s were just a whirlwind of conquest for them. They methodically locked down their power base, securing Anatolia and pushing deep into the Balkans. But the real game changer? That came in 1453, the fall of Constantinople. By capturing this legendary city, they didn't just get a new capital. They seized the symbolic heart of the old Roman Empire and, this is huge, they slammed the door on Europe's traditional land routes to the east. This basically forced countries like Spain and Portugal to find a new way, out on the seas, arguably kicking off the entire age of discovery.
Okay, so with Constantinople secured, their next move was to turn the Black Sea into what was essentially an Ottoman lake. Dominating this huge waterway gave them a secure northern border and a total chokehold on all the rich trade flowing out of Russia and Central Asia.
But you know how it is. That kind of dominance is bound to be challenged. As the Ottomans were cementing their power, another giant was stirring to the north, the Russian Empire. And this, right here, set the stage for a massive rivalry that would define the region for centuries to come.
You can pretty much understand this entire rivalry by looking at two simple and completely opposite goals. For the Ottomans, it was all about keeping things as they were, holding on to the Black Sea and protecting the incredible trade leverage they'd fought so hard for. For Russia, though, it was a singular obsession: push south, no matter what, to get a warm water port. That was their ticket for their navy to get to the Mediterranean and the wider world. And those two ambitions? Yeah, they just could not exist at the same time.
And this clash of ambitions wasn't some one-off thing. It played out again and again and again in these key regions: the mountains of the Caucasus, the fractured lands of the Balkans, and of course, the incredibly strategic Crimean Peninsula. They all became the bloody battlegrounds for a whole series of Russo-Turkish wars that would shape Eastern Europe for generations.
But as the centuries rolled by, the dynamics started to change. The once unstoppable Ottoman Empire, it started to weaken. And this created a massive power vacuum that had every major power in Europe really worried.
By the time we get to the 1800s, European diplomats weren't talking about the Ottoman threat anymore. No, they started using phrases like a disintegrating state, or even more bluntly, they called it the sick man of Europe. And this wasn't some sudden collapse. It was a long, slow unraveling that created a full new, very complicated problem.
This problem got a name in the halls of power. It was called the Eastern Question. And the core issue is simple, but also terrifyingly complex. What on earth happens when this massive empire finally falls apart? Who gets the pieces? And most importantly, how do we avoid a catastrophic all-out European war over the spoils?
The consequences of this slow decline were just explosive. From inside the empire, nationalist movements that had been suppressed for ages erupted all across the Balkans, with different ethnic groups fighting for their independence. And from the outside, the great powers, Britain, France, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, were circling like vultures, all trying to grab influence. And right out of this chaos, new nations like Bulgaria and Romania were born, carved straight out of the empire's weakening grip.
So when the empire finally did collapse after World War I, it wasn't just an ending. It was the explosive beginning of the modern Middle East and the Balkans as we know them. The intricate, ancient map of the Ottoman Empire was just wiped away. And in its place, European powers started drawing new lines in the sand.
These borders, often sketched out with zero regard for the local ethnic or religious realities on the ground, ended up creating many of the nations and, frankly, many of the conflicts that define these regions to this day.
There's this quote that just nails it perfectly. The story of the Ottomans didn't just stop. Its fall directly triggered the start of the modern stories of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Greece, Bulgaria, and so many others, with each one grappling with the legacy of that fragmented past.
And that leaves us with one final kind of unsettling thought. The Ottoman Empire is gone, for sure. But when you look at the conflicts over borders, these struggles for influence, and the persistent instability across the Balkans and the Middle East today, you have to ask yourself, was the Eastern question ever really answered? Or did it just splinter into a dozen new ones?